Yeah, you are. Get it together. Be presentable. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. What happened? Just go back. Oh. As long as we didn't like no, yeah.
1, 2. Welcome everybody to the third seminar of the Being Black in America series. Please give yourselves a round of applause for being here. So we've made it through the week, which is really exciting because I can imagine, especially for teachers and for students, it's been very busy. We've been in the middle of midterms, and it's really exciting that we get to gather here once again and speak about the important issues in our community. So I'm going to just start off by introducing the Black Student Union, the New England Conservatory's Black Student Union. If you guys don't know me, my name is Nedelka Prescod and I'm the president. So our mission is the Black Student Union is committed to the fortification and celebration of Black art and culture in the NEC community, the advocacy of equal representation and inclusion of all students at NEC, and the belief in educational practices as a means of cultivating fellowship and community. Our vision statement is to represent and ensure equal opportunity for students of color at NEC, celebrate and recognize the contributions of the African diaspora and its existence in today's social climate, educate students in the community at large about Black history, culture, and social landscape, interact with surrounding communities beyond NEC through outreach, stimulate discourse amongst youth regarding social issues in low-income communities uniquely from a Black perspective, and develop a critical consciousness amongst members of the BSU and our community at NEC. So we're really excited to have you guys here for our Being Black in America series. Over the past 2 weeks, this is our third week, we have been running this educational series which seeks to inform us and create discourse and dialogue around the topics that we find important. This is actually an 8-week seminar. The first 4 weeks are this semester, and then we're going to have the next 4 weeks next semester. In the past 2 weeks, the first week we had the exordium where we were kind of touching on all the topics we'll be touching on throughout this series. Last week we had Dr. Martin Pierre leading a panel of 5 students on topics regarding Black masculinity. It was a very interesting conversation. Dave was one of the panelists. Please give him a round of applause. Yeah, so it's been really interesting because it's been such an open space for everybody to ask questions, to learn, to get engaged with these topics. I think it's rare, especially in today's society, to find a space where everyone can feel safe to ask, even if you don't know, to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes and to engage honestly about these topics. So we're really excited to have the opportunity to host this, and we're really thankful to NEC for giving us the space and the platform, and thankful to the community that has helped us put this together. I'm going to introduce our board who has been putting all of this together. We have Evan Wright, who's our vice president and treasurer. We have Robin Smith, who's our secretary. And we have Paul Mardi, who is our communications and marketing director. Awesome. So before I get too much into it, we're going to start with a snippet of a video, and then we're going to get into what we'll be talking about today. We've got a very exciting speaker that will be interrogating and picking at her brain and just hearing the amount of wisdom that she's garnered over the years. So we're going to start with the video, and then we'll get into the introductions.
Let me just say that I am a very beautiful person. I'm sweet and intelligent and funny and awkward. And I just had to say that. Only because I'm a little tired of this stereotype about the angry Black woman, whoop-de-doo, right? Because as you can see, I am Black and a woman, and I'm not angry at all. Hell, I'm pissed the fuck off. I'm mad as hell. I'm so mad. I'm getting ready to break my foot off in everybody's ass, but pretend this is class so I can tell you why I'm mad at the education system. Mad because education is the key, yet they keep the poor locked out. They get hand-me-down books and hand-me-down chairs. Hand-me-down teachers who give them hand-me-down stairs. I'm pissed off at gentrification. Pissed that the rich be Robin Hoods and mad that Robin Hood was just a motherfucking myth. I'm mad because Barbie is a standard of beauty. I hate that fruits and vegetables are so damn expensive. So how the poor gonna eat healthy off some damn tater chips? I'm mad that the government and media are controlled by the same people, and those same people are the same people who control everything. I'm mad women get raped. I hate that I only got 3 minutes to say this poem, and I got about 10 minutes worth of angry. I'm mad that I can't say that I am a socialist out loud. Mad that the gay and lesbian can't be out loud and proud in the military and pissed off because only 28 states allow everyone to unite in holy matrimony. And while I appreciate civil unions, fuck civil unions. If I move to another state, then the state of my civil union is at stake. So what good is that gonna do for me in the state of Wyoming? And believe it or not, I'm still pissed the fuck off about slavery. That's right, I'm still mad because I still pick cotton off clothes racks and never racked up reparations. Mad because niggers call each other niggas, and sick because any minute sister girl's gonna turn around and call me a bitch. I'm mad at black men for reasons I don't have time to list. I'm pissed off at hip hop. I'm pissed off at black on black crime. I'm pissed off that Ricky Ross got all the crack and we can turn that shit back. I'm pissed the fuck off. I'm mad because above everything, at any given time and in any given space, I, as a black woman, can suffer from racism, sexism, homophobia, classism. I can be raped, be burned alive, and no one, not a single soul, will look up to acknowledge my absence from this universe because I am insignificant, because I am a black woman. And finally, you see, I have every right to be pissed the fuck off. But most of the times, despite what you believe, I'm really, really sweet.
Wow. Yeah, I think we should clap hands for that. Yeah, the first time we saw that, we were just sitting there like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, you get to that point where you're just, I don't know, anyway, that's besides the point. I'd like to introduce up Robin and Evan, who are going to be joining us in this talk. Thank you, Robin and Evan. And I would also like to introduce our guest speaker for the day. We are so honored and so lucky to have Nedelka Prescod to be joining us in this conversation on the intersections between blackness and womanness. Nedelka Prescod is the daughter of a musician/educator who continues to walk in the tradition as a member of the new contemporary improvisation faculty at the New England Conservatory's continuing education program, and as an ensemble coach and studio teacher in the corresponding college program. She's a graduate of the Philippa Jukes Schuler Middle School for the Gifted and Talented and the LaGuardia High School for the Arts. Nedelka received her Bachelor of Science in Music Education and Performance from New York University and a Master of Arts in Music Education from CUNY Brooklyn College Conservatory of Music. She's also a graduate of the New England Conservatory's Contemporary Improvisation Graduate Program, earning her Master's in Music, graduating with academic honors, and receiving the Gunther Schuler Medal for contributions to NEC. Woo! In the performance space, Nedelka's musical offering Manifest was her first self-released project, independently released in 2008. In 2010, she participated in the 8th Annual Panama Jazz Festival and has performed with MacArthur Fellows Award recipient Jason Moran. Nedelka has been featured on Kenny Garrett's 2 latest recording projects, one of which was Grammy nominated. She has performed background vocal work for Alicia Keys at the 2001 MTV Music Awards. She has toured Central America and the Caribbean with her father's classically trained chorale, the Roy Prescott Chorale, and as a member and soloist. As a solo vocalist, she has worked on various recordings of independent and major labels, performing house music with the likes of DJ Romaine and Matt Keys. In addition to musical arts, Nedelka is a self-taught artist of beaded and natural materials jewelry whose pieces have been on display and for sale at the Makada, which is the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and Arts, in the Clinton Hills section of Brooklyn, as well as featured on the cover of Graphis Photography Annual 2001. All of this stuff is not even enough to explain the woman that Nedelka Prescod is, the amount of knowledge that she has. So can we please put our hands together to welcome Nedelka Prescod to the stage.
Hi, Nedelka.
Hi, Melody.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I think we can just start off by having you just give a short introduction. We've given the long introduction. We've given all of the notes and the textbook introduction. But who is Nedelka? When you meet someone, who will they say Nedelka is? I guess. Yeah.
I tend to think of myself as a stay-at-home mom who had to work. I'm a musician, I'm a mother. My primary focus is to my son. I'm an everlasting student and musician, so I'm not necessarily pressed or rushed to get things done, even though I do believe deadlines are important. But I do believe in process and inner peace, and everything else is a journey.
That's beautiful. Awesome. So, Nedelka, we've been speaking over the past few weeks just about this project and, you know, these topics which I think as Black women, every single day, we find ourselves in this space where we have to choose sometimes. We have to choose at times when we don't even want to choose or need to choose. But the way that society has placed expectations on us, the way that, you know, the Black community has placed expectations on us, and the broader community as large has also placed expectation on us, has kind of put us in this position. So I think we can maybe just start off inside, speaking about, you know, Blackness and being a Black woman, like what that means to you, and how you have kind of gone through the process of being the Black woman that you are today, how you've been able to consolidate your relationship with your Blackness and your womanness.
Again, I think that's a process. Because who I am as a woman, who I am as a Black person, or just who I am as a human being in general is not the same as it was last month. And definitely not the same since my dad transitioned 2 months ago. So like this is huge in my life right now. So, and I've said this before, like I never really dealt with that until I came up here to Boston. Because the communities that I lived in, I walked in, I played in, outside of being in school, that's a different conversation. But in general, it's Black folk. So, you know, like even where my parents come from, my mother and my father both from Panama, but where my father specifically from, it's Black leadership, Black people, Black everything. And so the idea of looking at my Blackness as a thing wasn't really something I had to do, because we walked in greatness. And that's what I was told, is that you walk in greatness, you do your best. You practice humility, like no matter where you go, you honor everyone that's before you. But at the same time, don't tolerate crap from anyone. So like I never really had to contemplate, oh, I'm a woman in this situation, or I'm Black, literally until I came up here. And each year, each month, it's been shifting, it's been changing. Like I came up here very close around the time when Trayvon Martin was killed, which shifted my whole perspective of what Boston would be, because then Black Lives Matter came about. And, you know, obviously we are here at NEC. And so being one of the few Black faces I saw, and definitely in my age group, has definitely made me look at like, oh, well, what does this mean here? What does this mean now?
I think that's always such a difficult thing. I remember you speaking about, you know, also being Black and Latin, like an Afro-Latina. And I think also being in the space where you have to represent in NEC, let me speak about, you know, our context where you're representing Blackness, you're one of the only few Black people, like all of the Black, everything you say is exactly.
You have to dot all your I's, cross all your T's, because Black people in general are at stake because of your presence and your actions in this one place. Yes, I do believe you're supposed to walk in standards but you know, as a human being, we have to figure this out too. But also in terms of what you were saying about being Afro-Latina, that's another thing I had to come to grips with, because there are different pathways. Like, we understand colonization, we understand its effects on society, and we understand its effects on the diaspora. But the fact that my people are from Panama is a different path from those who are African American. And much respect to my African American fam, because the kind of oppression and struggle that's done in the US is a whole different beast. Not to say that it wasn't hard for those of us who are coming from the Caribbean, but we see what's still happening in America, who's a young country compared to everyone else, and ignorance that comes with that. Not on the people, but just the systems and what it takes to break through, if you can break through.
I wonder if maybe Robin would have any insight on her experience as like an African American young Black woman, and if you would maybe be able to kind of speak about some similarities that you find in your experience being in this space, or maybe some differences, kind of highlighting that for people who aren't familiar about the two differences, I guess.
I sort of have a similar experience with growing up around a predominantly Black community from Atlanta, Georgia. So there are a lot of leaders, there are a lot of very successful Black people in Atlanta, so that's all I knew growing up. I went to a historical Black high school, that's really all I knew. So coming here was definitely a bit of a culture shock for me. And I mentioned a lot before, early in the semester, that coming here was sort of me realizing that I was a different thing in itself. My identity was something that wasn't sort of the norm, not so much in playing, like being a classical musician, but just being sort of in this space in Boston, in a predominantly white community. So I think I'm very so much early in the process of my identity and realizing where I fit here. And it's interesting hearing your perspective, coming from New York, coming here, and then you sort of blossom into, like, I look up to you, and so when I see you, I see you as sort of this blossomed flower, and me sort of in that process. But I very much think that it's a journey for everyone in their own sort of thing. It's like Nedelka would not be able to tell me how to blossom into my identity and to how to be this Black woman that people think they're so strong, so warm, so loving. So that's just sort of my.
But there are things though that I feel as women we can work on, because I don't think we have enough conversations.
Yeah.
Something that I've always done, I've always been attracted to, and not in a sexual way, but I've always been attracted to women older than me. Because I felt like I felt young, I felt naive, I felt like I know for a fact I made some dumb mistakes in life, some of them not too long ago. But I always felt like I wanted to hear what was coming up. So I think it's important that, speaking to the woman part of it, and some of this is women, and definitely some of it is Black women, we need to talk generation to generation. Yeah. Because there are some things that will be similar, like, you know, how our bodies process through time, or just having to break through different mental states, because we as women are taught that we have a shelf life. And so then we have to revision who we are, because society is telling us in every possible way that for you to be successful, for you to be beautiful, for you to be sexy, for you to get anything out of life, you have to be 12. Which is just not realistic, and especially as a musician, the great thing that I had was a mentor who told me, and I can't say this is for everyone, but she said to me when I was in my 20s, she said to me, you know, women don't come into their voice until they're like in your mid-30s and up. And so hearing that was helpful, because as someone who was kind of watching, I didn't necessarily want to be in like the music industry, because I know I didn't have the spirit for it, because I'll cuss somebody out and never get a job. But I always wondered about like the presentation, like what does it take for that? And I had friends who were in their 30s pretending to be 18. Which, I don't want to be 18 again. Like I want to enjoy the fact that I'm growing older, wiser, I'm caring less about foolish things. But then I don't want to feel like my opportunities are not available to me because, and no offense to my brothers, I love y'all, but because men don't think I'm as pretty or as young or whatever it is that men need to, not all men, and maybe not even in your generation, but like definitely older generations, I think more than now, they need a woman to be a certain kind of cute, quiet, coy, and I'm not, listen, your girl is not that. And even reconciling that, like the fact that I'm loud, you know, I laugh hard. I say what's on my mind. I will question you. These are things I have to get comfortable with.
When you talked about sort of having that, like we need to have more conversations, right? Did you find it difficult to sort of talk to the Black women around you when you were younger, so like your peers? Or did you find that it was easier to seek advice from those older than you? Like I feel very comfortable, I could come up to you and I feel like I could ask you a question. You know, I wouldn't feel anything, but maybe like peer to peer, it might be a little like sort of a wall there that I have to sort of get past.
And I think some of that is the competition that we do amongst ourselves. You know, I don't want to give away all my secrets as a woman because I don't want you to use my secret and get my thing that I'm trying to call to me. And then on top of that, this is where I also feel like being Afro-Latina was different, because outside of my village that I grew up in, I got educated in places where I was the only one that was Black and Latina, or the only one that was Black and female. And so like between women, I could feel there was a difference, and it's not a bad thing, but there's a different way that I think that Black women handle themselves even in relationships that are different from the way someone like me who's coming from Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latina handles themselves. So there was a little interestingness that sometimes I left with questions. And definitely it was cool to sit amongst the older women, because I would just sit and listen. Just listen. And they would talk freely in front of me because I wasn't, you know, like being ditzy about it. And even now, like I find just listening, we don't listen enough, even as musicians. We don't listen enough. We want to talk, we want to input. You know, we live in a world where you can say whatever you want on as many social media platforms as you can manage. But I just want some wisdom.
So something really cool that we have the opportunity of. It's okay, it's water. Something really cool that we have the opportunity of interacting with today is a podcast by two Black women who are currently graduate students at Eastman College. It's called the Classically Black Podcast, and they made a special podcast for this special event with Nedelka. And in this podcast, they're just speaking about various issues that come with being a Black woman. And in the specific episode, there's actually sheets at the door if you guys want to check it out afterwards. But this is episode 23, and it's called The Right Type of Black Girl. And in this episode, Delaney and Katie walk through a Huffington Post article about struggling to be the right type of Black girl in professional and academic spaces. Then they discuss how it relates to their lives as classical musicians and music students. So I'm gonna play a snippet of it. Paul's gonna play a snippet, number 2. And we're just gonna listen. It's about a minute long, and then I'll ask Nedelka a question after hearing that. Thank you, Paul. Number 2.
As of like, just it's been conditioned in me. Is that I don't do any of that palatable stuff. The whole not speaking up in class discussions because you don't want to be too controversial and putting your head down when they start talking about race and slavery. Like I've been in a class, not a class, it was a training session for like bias and stuff with another black person. I can tell you who it was later, but this person, like when we started talking about race and all that, was just like, and like was visibly like uncomfortable and like, you know, and like that's one thing, uncomfortable, yeah. But also like not wanting to speak up, not wanting to bring attention. You would know what I'm talking about. Someone would, we'd be like, hey, what's good? Like don't really want to do that. And I remember I was like, hey, it was like a dance thing, and I was like, hey, we gonna twerk. He was like, I'm not doing that here. These are not my people. I'm like, I'm your people, and I'm here.
And they think you doing it at home anyway.
Right. So I'm just like, you know, they can see you black, right?
Yeah, so that snippet, obviously it's a soundbite, so we don't have the whole conversation, but I think that snippet was interesting because it links back to something that you brought up a bit earlier about, you know, kind of sometimes having to feel like I need to change the way that I act because I'm in a space not amongst my people. And I know for myself as well, in the school where we're like 3% of the population, in most of our classes, you'll be the only like black person, or there'll be 2 of you. And if there's 2 of you, you're trying to act right. Like as soon as you get too loud, there's issues. I had an incident myself where I was in class and I spoke about race and people got really uncomfortable, like, whoa, we don't do that here, you know. And I don't know, for you, how have you been able to kind of navigate that in your journey, and how do you stay palatable?
Maybe even speak as a teacher, you know, what is your perspective on being in spaces where students aren't, you know, represented a lot.
The first thing I'll say is when I first came to NEC, I had a classmate, schoolmate, because we were in the same year we graduated together, which means we took a lot of our classes together. And I noticed that I was the only black person in the department. And I noticed that when he would walk into a space and it was a few of us, he'd be like, hey, Evan, what's up, Robin? Hey, Naledi. And he would get to me, like, yo, Nedelka, what's up? White guy from France. It's like, do I talk to you like that? He's like, yo, you from Brooklyn, you know. I was like, I'm sorry that you have this impression of black folk, but I don't know any black person who talks like that. So I was having to deal a lot of times with, not to say that I can't get ghetto, but it's there's an impression that I felt that I had to, you know, buck up against. And again, feeling like I needed to do this for all of the black people in Brooklyn. In terms of students, it's funny because, is Gina here? Hi, Gina. She asked, do you mind if I ask that question that you asked me? Okay. Now that I don't put it out in the ear that you had a question that you asked. She asked me, how do you feel about working with a gospel ensemble, right? Working with the gospel ensemble in a predominantly white institution, where there are only 2 black people in it, pretty much. And I've been open with the ensemble, hey Tyler, and I've been open with the ensemble, he's also in the ensemble, throughout the years, and I've gone through my different feelings about it. Because, you know, amongst black people, sometimes I think this can be looked down on as a level of selling out. I was gonna say coonery, but maybe that's not. I'm sorry, did we clutch pearls? I'm sorry. Selling out. And I never want to be an agent for that. But what I've been able to, like, within myself, because I think it's important, I just couldn't find the reason to speak. Like, why would I continue, or anyone, not just me, anyone continue to just share music of a people when the people are not present? And so, for me, I take it as an opportunity in this day and age where we need to bring awareness in to talk about the history, the culture. And like I say in the ensemble, I cannot teach the music, definitely, because I'm also Christian, and I'm not trying to be an apostle or disciple in that context, but I cannot do the music without telling the story. Because a lot of what we like about Black music is the struggle. It's the sound of the struggle. And so we have to have the conversations. We have to talk about the real things. The fact that folks didn't want to come up with a spiritual. They had to. These were the things that they relied on. These are the things that kept them going. That kept like a whole group of enslaved Black people on rhythm, trying to get through their day, like stuff that we can't even imagine, even those of us who come from Black houses. So it has been weird for me, but then I also feel like, use our platforms. And for whatever reason, this has been one that has been offered to me that I receive it and I accept it, and I see it as a form of privilege, but I'm gonna use it because we need to have the conversation.
Yeah, I really loved what you said about, just the whole way you shaped the conversation around, having this thing of, oh, am I a sellout, and getting to that point of accepting and finding a way to accept what you're doing. I think for myself, I also relate to that, being the only African student and speaking on all things Africa, like anything that has to do with Africa, ask me, I know, probably, jokes. But also like sharing my music, like for myself, because it's something so personal to me, and there's nobody in the space that really knows it in that type of way, but it also feels in a similar way like telling the story and actually getting people aware about what is happening outside of this little space that we exist in. So I think that's a really beautiful thing, a beautiful place to get to, but it's definitely a journey, as we've been saying. Another question I'd actually like to ask from what you were just speaking about, you mentioned that you're a Christian woman, and I think people don't talk about it because it's like we don't talk about religion and blah blah blah, but I think that's a struggle that a lot of people go through as musicians, especially in a very secular environment. For me personally, my experience has been having to change my language. If I'm speaking about God, I have to be like, oh, well, the universe said blah, 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 blah. Or like, I'm going to go home and like reflect on it, and like, instead of pray on it. And I'm not praying on it, I'm reflecting. So I think it would be interesting to kind of hear on your perspective, like how that has been. And I think that's kind of a universal thing as well. Not only to Christianity, but just to people's beliefs and stuff like that. But as a Christian woman, from your perspective, how you've dealt with that?
That one has been specifically hard, and I actually just recommitted to my Christian walk recently. And a lot of it had to do with, this is also a journey, a lot of it had to do with how Christianity was taught to Black folks. And so I had to reckon with the idea that this religion is another thing of colonization, especially because of how it was used. But then, having done my own personal investigations, I understand that the stories and the meanings and everything that is in the Bible actually have older roots than what we're told it is. So the fact that it was given back to us because it comes out of the culture, the fact that as with everything that we tend to have as Black people in the diaspora, how our own information, how our own practices were taken by other folks and then taught back to us, that's the thing that I had to get to. Because I can now trace back to other stories, sources, history, information that shows that the way we practice Christianity, like, yeah, that's a part of it. But the way it was given to us, that's not exactly how it was. And so that's a whole other conversation, even dealing with the Black church, that I don't want to get into here. But it's a mind wash, you know. So I had to reclaim it for myself, on top of the fact that just even in my personal journey, and as Felicia and I were talking about, you know, our children are at that age where they're becoming independent, where I've had to, especially because I'm up here by myself, where I've had to find strength in something, and I know it can't be necessarily human beings because we fail each other. And so it's brought me back in.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'd like to maybe shift the conversation a little bit and ask Evan a question that you can reflect on afterwards. So one of the things that Black women continuously have to deal with from childhood until the day we probably kick the bucket is is kind of the relationship that we have with Black men in our community. And that is always that is always a very that's all Black. It's always been a very difficult thing. I think for Black kids, like the Black community is the most fatherless community out of all the communities, and it's not because of how we act or because of our genetics or our DNA. It's because of how society has been constructed for Black men to end up, you know, leaving their households and blah 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 blah. So from a child, you like grow up with no father, so you already have this interaction with Black men, like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a subliminal interaction with Black men. That's probably the wrong word. And then like a child, like as a girl child, I grew up with no father, so in my mind, the way that I relate to Black men is already affected. I'm already relating to them in them not being there. And then you grow up and become a woman, and then if you're heterosexual or whatever, or even if you're not, you are looking for a person to marry, or you just are in this world where so much is put on you as a Black woman, like Black men put so much on you to be carrying them, while other communities, I'm always saying like society is built on the backs of Black women because, you know, Black men are being carried by Black women with, like, I've got a lot of opinions, but I would just like to hear from you, Evan, first maybe. This is a very pressure-free environment, it's a safe space, so I'm being very serious. This is a very safe space. So in your upbringing and just in your journey, how would you say your relations with Black women have, or with women, let me not say Black women, let me say women, have been molded by the Black women in your community and just have been molded by your personal journey? Like how have your interactions kind of changed? What has society told you? What have you had to throw away? Like, this is a very open question. It's a safe space, ignore laughter.
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of people have different perspectives and different experiences. I have one perspective and experience that I grew up in a place where there wasn't a lot of Black people around. And the only kind of interaction and like community I received from Black people was in the church. And you know, it was like 2 hours away from where I was living, from Los Angeles. And in the suburb I lived in, there wasn't a lot of people looked like me. So most of my experiences that kind of shaped how I viewed the Black community in general was in church. And in the church I grew up in, I grew up in, you're right, a lot of the, you know, programs, a lot of the things that worked and things that, you know, were successful, and a lot of the interactions I had were with older people, and particularly older women, and then Black women, Black men, Black women, and they were strong figures in my maturation, and I think that another experiences I've had were with my parents, obviously, and my mother has been actually like the nurturer in my life, the one that who not only provides emotional support, but also financial support, and she was actually primarily like the caregiver, but like she ran the household, you know. My mom and dad, they lived with one another for a number of years until they divorced when I was in high school. And when that happened, it changed my perception of my father and my mother and their relationship. My father wasn't loyal, so what that created, that made me like side with my mother more, and that made me spend more time with my mother and start to understand her feelings and perspective, like not just as a parent but as a person, you know, just in general. And I think from that experience, I really started to understand more of how the person I am today was shaped by my mother and my father.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I'd like to maybe zoom in to what you were just speaking about. So you spoke about, you know, how your mother was kind of caregiver, and then she also ran the household and was financial, blah, 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 blah. And there's this thing in the community, in the world, about black women having to always be strong, being strong black women. And I wonder, Nedelka, because you're also a single mother, raising a son and being a caregiver and being a provider, and then also having to deal with society and all of that, from your perspective, how do you think that has shaped your view of the world, shaped your journey, and how do you feel about that term, strong black woman? Like, what is a strong black woman? Is there a strong black woman? Is it a good thing to be a strong black woman?
I think we need to, like, strong in what way? Is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Strong in what way? Personally, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to have to be strong all the time. You know, I want to cuddle, you know. It's funny, I think I told you guys this before. The person who even told me about NEC, when he knew that I had finished the degree program here and was looking to do another degree here at NEC to me, he said to me, be careful. And I was like, well, I'm from Brooklyn, like, what you trying to say? He was like, you better stop that with this whole getting an education thing, because you're gonna end up by yourself. I was like, are you kidding me? Don't men like smart women? Like, I don't understand. I am single. Happily so. But it does feel like it's an issue. Like, again, I'm Afro-Latina, and I'm just looking at my culture and how the men show up and how the women show up. Or even if I can be a little bit more transparent, just, you know, kind of looking at my mom and my dad. And anyone who knows my mom and my dad is like this force, and my mother was always kind of a little submissive, not a little, a lot. But my mother always told me, get an education, because no one can take that from you. And I think some of that was in response to what she may have been experiencing. On top of the fact that my father is a warrior and he just kind of handled us a certain way. He wanted boys, by the way, my name would have been Gunther if he had his way. He was into Russian composers, he's a classical musician. And so he kind of handled us in that kind of a way. So the fact that my dad is like very strong and raised his daughters to be strong, and then my mother's encouraging us strong to also do the same, I don't think that necessarily, I'm not sure if the same conversation was being shared with the guys of my generation, or if they were being prepared for women who would be that way. And it's created an issue for not just me, and, like, you know, years ago when it used to, not years ago, I'm lying, just the other day, when it used to matter a lot more, it created a lot of stress. You know, because I didn't feel that it was a big deal for me to have to be silent and quiet, again, like what I was saying before around men, you know, like if to me, it's my partner. You don't own me. If I do something that's kind, you know, if I cook, which I love to do, I think a good man gets all of that. But you don't just get it. Like, are you showing up for me? Because if you're not, you know, not I'm being spiteful, but, you know, the will to do that in someone like me doesn't really show up that way. So we're both going to sit at the dinner table with a candle going and we're not going to eat. You going to cook? And I love to cook, you know what I mean? But it's just the way I was raised, the way I was groomed, didn't necessarily always fit in line with the image of what a lot of the guys, at least in my generation, kind of expected out of a woman. Yeah. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to reckon with, especially as a woman when you're growing older. Like, who here doesn't want partnership? You know, you're not gonna answer me. You're gonna leave me out there. Like, can we agree? Right? This is what we. I think it's a human. I don't even think it's a desire. I think it's a human need to be loved and to want to have a connection with someone. But the society tells us for you to do that, you have to play the role in this kind of a way, and some of us don't. Some of us can't.
You talked about sort of being the woman that you're going to be, or that you saw yourself to be. It didn't align with the way you saw your mother, or how she sort of taught you to be. Can you speak a little bit more on that? Like, so we're talking about being a strong Black woman. How did that look when you say you were 10, and how does that look now? And I feel like it's shifting for us. I want to hear Neletti's sort of point of view on that.
At 10, I was really silly. I don't know, and I don't want to make it seem like my mother is not a strong woman. She was strong in her way, because I think this is why I was saying, like, strong how? Because what it took for some woman to just even survive in a particular situation takes a certain level of strength. Just as much as it takes a certain level of strength to speak up for yourself and then understand that if I do this, this may not get me that thing that everybody gets when they play this role. I didn't understand it when I was younger. I kept thinking, it's me, there's something wrong with me. I'm not pretty enough, you know, I'm not this enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. I kept telling myself, and then finally I realized, I'm just too much, you know. And that could be a bad thing, but not in this kind of way. I think anyone who walks fully in themselves, I think it will always create a problem with folks around them who are not doing it. And this could be female to male, female to female, male to male, Black to white, green to purple. I think it's just an insecurity thing that we as human beings, we like to control things in people. And so if someone shows up and you feel like you cannot control them, it's problematic. Like, we feel like somehow, I don't know, I don't know, because I try not to live my life in that kind of a way, but I know that it's an issue.
Yeah, I think for me, the way that it has kind of changed over the years, like when I was 10, so I've always just been this like starry-eyed, ambitious, like, oh my God, I'm gonna be the president. So when I was younger, and I'd kind of be looking for role models. Okay, my number one role model, who has been my role model since I was probably like 5 or whatever, has always been Beyonce, which is cool. But Beyonce aside, it was kind of like, you know, looking at these powerful women in the world, whoever was deemed powerful in that space and in that time. And a lot of the time, these women would be powerful white women. So I'd be like, okay, well, in order to be like, you know, powerful, I have to act like this woman acts. So kind of trying to emulate what those people are. It was only like when I got to, it was like grade 6 when I started realizing that in me trying to emulate these women who don't look like me, I was not kind of getting the same reaction that I would expect to get, because it felt, and it still feels like, I always have to do the extra step in order to be the same. So it's kind of like, you know, you can be strong, and there's a lot of strong white women. I'm not gonna take that away, but it's kind of like, if you want to be the same type of strong as, I can't think of anyone right now, Angela Merkel. If you want to be the same type, oh, she's the Chancellor of Germany. Okay, let me think of someone else. Angelina Jolie, there we go. So if you, yeah, she was one of the women. So I was like, oh, like she gets to be an artist and she gets to be like in the UN. So like I want to do that, you know. But I kind of realized that for me, as a black girl, even in my school, I would kind of try to, you know, take on that role of being like, okay, well, you know, I can do it all and I can be kind of good at it all. But then I realized that it always had to be, like I always had to work just that much harder to ever get any of the recognition or any of the roles that I wanted, or like even in school plays, like I had to act. I had to be amazing. Like white girls could be average, but I had to be amazing. So I think that was kind of how it shifted for me. However, like with regards to the strong black woman thing, I struggle a lot with that statement because I would assume that I present as a strong black woman. And that's because I was raised by a strong black woman. And that term for me is really difficult because I was telling you guys earlier this week about how in South Africa we have this word for a strong black woman. It's mbogoto, and mbogoto is the direct translation. It's like a knife, the blade of a knife. That's what they call strong black women. And they say a woman holds a knife by its sharp edge. So like, you know, it's all this like really militant type of stuff. And it was always like a good thing to be a strong black woman. If you guys know of Winnie Mandela, she was kind of the prototype. She was Nelson Mandela's wife. And while he was in jail, she was like pushing the struggle and blah, 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 blah. Then as soon as he got out of jail, she was demonized. And it was just a big whole thing. But the whole concept of this mbogoto and the strong black woman, for me, always felt like I have to be a strong black woman, but what is it at the expense of? Is it at the expense of myself? Am I being I can only be a strong black woman like Winnie Mandela if I'm supporting a strong black man, which was Nelson Mandela in that case. So I think it's a very difficult thing to deal with. And like you were saying, like, we're tired, like sometimes I just don't want to be strong, I just want to sleep, I just want to be cuddled, I just want to like, you know, so it's definitely a difficult.
I was thinking like, when I soften up my voice because I'm tired, people are like, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? I was like, dang, do I talk that hard?
Yeah.
You were saying something about, I also came to think of strong black women as not attractive.
Yeah.
And that's a whole, it's just annoying.
Yeah.
It's more tiresome than anything else. Like, can I just live? Like, can I be a person? Because in my mind, sometimes I look at folk and I'm like, I see you doing so and so, so I'm not saying anything to you.
Yeah.
Like, if I can let you live and I can see these things that you're handling and the way that you're handling as a human being, I get it.
Yeah.
Why do you have to label me as this thing?
Yeah.
This thing. Yeah.
And I think another interesting thing that comes from the whole conversation about being strong, I think in the black community in general, not even just with black women, but when we start to speak about mental health, it kind of shakes that stability of the strongness that you're supposed to be. So I don't know for you what your journey has been, getting to the point where you're okay, or not okay, but you have accepted, you know, that, you know, I'm not always perfect. I'm not always at my strongest. How have you dealt with mental health issues as a woman, as a human being, as a musician, and as a strong black woman?
I specifically have suffered from anxiety and depression from the time I was 15 until maybe 2 years ago. And for me, I had a friend when I was in college, and she would say to me, God, you just tell everybody everything. And then she said to me, she figured out that it was my way of like coping and my way of being able to get through certain things. And even like, you know, here as a teacher or anywhere that I go, specifically since I've been in Boston, I sometimes wonder like, is that not the best professional move to admit that I've dealt with mental health issues. But that's the whole problem with the disease, is that it's a silent killer. And so it's the suffering in silence or not advocating for yourself is, for me, it was the thing that kept me under for so long. And then I started to learn the power of speaking up, and then also just realizing, like, this is my life, this is my story. You can't tell me how to feel. I'm not gonna come at you crazy or any kind of way, but you definitely cannot tell me how to feel, how to process it, or to just put it aside and keep going, because that's the thing that's making me crazy. So I don't know, you know. I also know that you guys are making it possible for certain conversations to be on the table, and that's just what it is. So I'm just kind of right in that boat too, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And so I will continue to speak, and I try not to have a fear like, is this gonna stop me? And some of it is just like, well, people think different of me. But I think the beautiful thing about getting older is that I don't care. So, you know, at this point in my life, talking about it and being open about it is the thing that's helped me come out of it. I will say about mental health issues, I don't know if it's something that I can say I'm finished with. I just know what my triggers are, and I feel empowered to not place myself in situations or to be around people or to keep things or people in my life that would trigger me, because I had to pull myself up on myself and, you know, just holding on to my faith system in that kind of a way. So with mental health, I think we don't demonize people if they come in, God forbid, and say they have cancer, if you can see an obvious wound. And I would like people to consider that mental health issues are wounds. They create wounds, and they also need attention. It's just that you can't put a Band-Aid on it, you know, because we don't like to talk about spirit, and we don't like to talk about these things, just the emotional part of it. No one wants to talk about that, but that is the essence of it all. Can I just say there's one thing that I hate? When people say, you all in your feelings. Where the hell else am I supposed to be? This is why we have issues in this world, because people are not feeling. Like, you know, you're too cool, or you don't want to let somebody know. You have to be in your feelings. This is why we have so much I think. This is why we have so much coldness in the world, because no one wants to deal with their feelings. You in your, okay, I'm in my feelings. Yeah, that's what's helping me to be sensitive. That's what's helping me to be a musician. Because it's not, you know, we can read it on the paper, but the actual execution of it is something that you feel. It's something that you sense beyond your eyes. So why wouldn't I be feeling? So yeah, I'm a fan of talking about it, and getting the help that you need, being honest with it, telling folks I need a moment, putting it on the table with folks. Hey, I know we're talking, or we're dealing with this, or whatever the nature of the relationship is. This is also what I'm dealing with. I think it's important to know your triggers and to handle your life accordingly. And that's one of the strongest lessons I've realized recently, that my life is my responsibility. My happiness is my responsibility. I used to be one of those people who would be afraid to check someone because I don't want to hurt your feelings, but yet I had to check you because you hurt mine. And so I would be in this position where it's just like you or me. And I'm, I try to, at one point I thought I would be a nun. Like I feel that strongly about my spiritual walk. And so I didn't want to offend you or hurt you, so I would go in my own corner, and I realized, oh, absolutely not. I'm gonna cuss you out. Not you, but general. And then I'm gonna go home and pray. No, I'm kidding. But I'm not gonna cuss you out. But I'm definitely gonna be honest with you about, this is how this is coming across to me. Can you help me understand it? And depending on your response, then I decide, okay, I can mess with you some more, or I can't. But it's my life.
You were talking about how your feelings kind of enhance your musicianship.
Yeah.
And how being you is synonymous with being you, like performing on stage. Like you're connected with your emotions and how music.
Say that again about performing on stage.
My question to you is, how do you think like self-acceptance looks like for a musician? How do you connect to your emotions and be vulnerable and still operate in a space that can be intimidating. A lot.
And this is one of the things that I also try as a teacher to tell students. The assumption is you don't know something when you go to school. But then we like to pretend, so this whole idea of not asking questions, or you're in a class and you're speaking up only on the things you don't know about. I mean, to me, that's kind of a waste of money, because I know those things. I came here to get the things I don't know. And so I had to get comfortable with, and here's the thing, because I came here as an adult student who was already a music teacher into NEC, to study the things I don't know, there was a little bit of vibiness that I thought I experienced. And I had to tell myself, well, you know, I have a whole life outside of this that no one knows about, but I choose to show this part because this is what I'm working on before you. So I had to get right in my mind about that. And so I had to get comfortable with asking questions. I don't know this aspect of music, but this aspect of music, oh, I know that. But that's not what I came here for. So I wish that more students would embrace the fact that you're in school. Ask questions. Write down notes. And if you still don't understand, ask more questions. See the professor. And if the rest of your classmates or your schoolmates are trying to judge you because it's making it seem like you don't know something, yeah, that's why I'm in school. And to get comfortable with that process, because I feel like we delay or we don't get what we need to get when we walk under that pretense. You know? Yeah.
So yeah, you were talking about emotions and feelings and how that sort of affects your musical journey or your performance space. And I think it's interesting because being a woman, being black, being a musician is a very particular thing, because we're putting ourselves on a stage constantly and making ourselves vulnerable. And so when you're talking about mental health, that sort of affects that also. And so I wanted to unpack the symptoms of the cycle that creates this sort of feeling that we don't need to talk about mental health. And so, like, one of my experiences is that sort of growing up, we were piggybacking on strong black women. I just kind of felt that, oh, my parents thought, my dad told me I could do anything, so I can do anything. And so my life is super busy because I have this cloud over my head saying that Robin can do anything, she can, you know, so I'm sort of stretching myself a lot. And so we're thinking that, and then I guess you sort of think about, well, if you have this sort of perspective that you can do all things, and as soon as you have a feeling that is weak, or as soon as you have a feeling that, oh, I shouldn't express how I feel because they might think that I can't do this. And so, can we just sort of talk about that cycle? I think it's particularly because of who we are as black women and being a musician. And we could also talk about being a classical musician and how the stiffness of that is even more sort of hard to get through. And yeah, so if you had any thoughts on that initially.
Sorry. There's actually a clip that they speak about that in the podcast. Could we play a little bit of that and then also reflect on it? It's the third one. So, like, Delaney and Katie are also classical musicians, and they touch on these topics as well pretty well, so I think it could be a good way to...
I'm just saying, like, black people can't do that. We can't be mediocre. You know what I'm saying? We don't have that privilege of mediocrity. And I don't care, you can DM me if you want to. That's fine. Because it's like, you just don't have that opportunity to miss the bell and to miss the mark and ask for extensions. I'm like, yeah, the teachers will be like, yeah, you can have an extension, I don't care. But it's just like, just the way we have to move in space because of stuff like this. It's a lot. So is there anything, we talked about this stuff, you talked about like...
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of touching on, if you feel like you can't do something, don't mention it. when you're at a space where you're a leader, you're successful. Like we talk about a lot of celebrities that have mental health issues that are Black, maybe possibly because they feel like you can't mention that you don't have room for there's no room for mediocrity. So, just keep all that other stuff to the side and just show the best you.
But I don't think there's a space. I feel like those are different conversations, kind of, because I don't love mediocrity. That doesn't have to do with the same thing as like having to do 100 things well. I actually do believe we live in a day and age of mediocrity. All you gotta do is beat your face real good, have a good look on Instagram, and you don't really have to do anything.
Or maybe just being seen as mediocre. Not that you are mediocre, but that as soon as you take a step back and say that I can't do this, or that I'm actually not feeling well, or I'm sad. As soon as you mention anything like that, then it seems like you're being mediocre.
I don't know if okay, then, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's also even from an internal place where you see yourself as mediocre, because I'm that lady, I'm supposed to be able to do all this stuff. I'm supposed to have ensemble in the morning and then have classes and then still do BSU and then go home and then do this. I can't be mediocre because you've just kind of, like Robin was saying, you've been raised with this cloud over your head that's told you that you can do everything, and when you get into the space or these spaces, that is what is expected of you, because you're one of the only ones in the space. You're expected to be extraordinary, so you also feel that even within yourself.
So mediocre to you is not necessarily a quality, but versus
A perception.
Yeah. I don't know. Not to say that I've not really cared about how people perceive me. Here's the thing. I've been told I was different and strange for so long that I don't think I have that pressure on me. I had a different kind of psychosis. But to the end of what you're saying, there's a guy I know who I went to church with. He's actually from Boston. His name is Manny. He said, years ago, he told me this. He said, you can do everything you want to. You just can't do it all at the same time. And I think when he told me that years ago, it stuck in me because it just made a lot of sense. And so now at this point in my life when I'm learning to slow down, which I think is something that needs to be taught. There are a couple of things that I wish were taught to us. How our brains work, how we learn. And then the other thing is being patient with your process so that when those moments come and you're juggling a lot, or you just get up and you don't feel so well, that you don't judge yourself, not you specifically, but that we don't judge ourselves in those moments, and we allow ourselves to understand that life is a journey. And sometimes, as long as I do my best, sometimes my best, depending on a couple of dynamics, are here. And then tomorrow it could be here. That doesn't mean that I'm being mediocre. It's the balance of life. Now, if I'm truly showing up unprepared and not doing, that's a whole different conversation. But I think we need to be patient with ourselves. But I also do think that, yes, that is something that's coming out of slavery. Personally, I think it is. Because I don't think it was taught to me as you're a black person in this world. It was not. But I think in general, my people, my family, the village I come from, I think as black people, we were taught that we have to it's an unspoken attitude that we were taught just in general. But I think just allowing ourselves to practice being human beings is so important. So important. Like, be honest with yourself. How do you feel today? It doesn't give you permission to slack or be less than who you are, but get up today and say, this is what I need to get done, and really work on those things and be honest in our process. And I gotta sometimes tune out. And sometimes I just don't go on a lot of times I don't go on social media because it's too much pressure. People looking pretty and they're doing 100 million things and we're only posting what we want the world to see. And so that kind of insanity, those are triggers for me also, and I had to realize that with myself. There are certain times I have to just shut the world down and go into my space and figure out what does Nedelka need just to get through today, just so I can show up. And show up at my best. It's not even just as a black person trying to save the world and all the black people. Just trying to do my best. And yes, I want to look good as a black person.
That was a really nice question. I'm going to shift it a bit, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions. But I'm curious to know from you how your interactions with white women have been, like a woman outside of our space, because I think, you know, looking at the whole history of where feminism came from and how it was taken and reinterpreted and given back to the world, you kind of, sometimes there's this juncture that you find between how people understand womanness. And it's especially when you get into, it's especially frustrating, let me rather say, when you get into spaces with, you know, well-meaning, like white people who are like, you know, I'm on your side, but I think let's not focus on that right now. Like, let's liberate us as women and stuff like. So how has your experience with that been? How do you feel like one can ally better, I guess, for you at least? And how do you feel like, what are some of the experiences that you've just had that have gotten you to the space where you interact the way that you do with everyone, I guess?
It depends on the woman. It depends on the white woman, because I've been able to share time and conversations with different women. And I laugh when you said that, because one of the women that I've shared good time with and our sons have hung out together is Dr. Sandler, who's an enlightened, conscious, mindful Christian woman. And then there are other women who just don't realize that what they're saying or what they're doing is offensive. And I've given myself permission to use that moment to say, by the way, this coming across as, and this, I think a lot of that too has to do with me dealing with anxiety and depression, just practicing addressing things in the moment. And I tend to do that when it comes to race, which then sometimes makes it a little bit electric, because as you know, saying what you honestly, even if you say it with the best intentions, it can be a little sharp when people are not ready to hear it or receive it. But I'm a fan of being honest, because it's the only way we're gonna change anything. You're speaking ignorantly, and you say that you want to understand this black and white thing, so let me help you. Like, don't tell me what black people are thinking, because you're not black, so I'll give you what I'm thinking, and what the conversations have been like between me and folks who think like me, who are black. I just think it depends on the person, from person to person. Or institution to institution sometimes too.
When speaking on the topic of feminism, do you find yourself operating more so as a woman, or as a, like, do you find yourself having to choose, or like how do you process that in general?
Yeah. And also, do you call yourself a feminist? We might be putting this thing on top of you.
No, it's funny, because I actually, the first feminist, if I'm going to use that term, or womanist, is my grandmother. My grandmother is the person that taught me how to roar. She had my mother when she was 17, which was kind of like, I guess, a thing, you know, whatever. And then she married my aunt's husband. And the way my grandmother told me, my grandmother's very fancy, I know this to be true. And she was a dancer to the point where the boyfriend that she had, until he died for 50 years, had this club in Panama called Don Rolando. And people like Celia Cruz and Tito Puentes would come through. And so she was this person who was in the clubs and dancing a lot, just through her life. And she married a man who, when they got married, said to her, okay, you're done. You don't need to dress like that anymore. You're married now, you're a wife. And she turned to him and said, but you met me like that. And he slapped her. And she said when she came to her senses, we actually have an ashtray that's about this high, it's wood. She said she had one in the house where she lived, and she took it up to hit him. And his mother walked in and caught her, and she said she walked out the house, a house that she helped pay for, a house that had all her clothes, new appliances, which was kind of huge because we're talking about like 1940s and 50s. Black people owning their house, new appliances, new clothes from Sears and Roebuck. And she walked away from all of it because he hit her. And she was gonna try and kill him. And she never went back. And I think some of that, like again, she's the one that taught me how to roar, so I think some of that, I have that within me. And so I definitely all kind of thought that maybe, is this feminist? Like, you know, but since the conversations recently, to my awareness, have made a distinction and have opened up the conversation about what it is to be pro-woman, let's say that, as a white woman or as a black woman, and what that means, it is different. It is different, you know, because we're socialized different. We were told different things. Would I call myself any of that? I don't know. And I try not to use labels, but I do buy into a pro-woman. You know, just the same thing like when people say pro-black, some people think that it's anti something else. I just believe in the need for women to be strong. Yeah. In terms of being able to speak up for herself and take care of herself, but still be loved in a gentle way.
Wow, thank you so much. I think the audience is probably bubbling with thoughts and opinions that they would like to share. So I'm gonna offer this opportunity for anyone, anybody, this is a safe space, to maybe come up and ask a question or make a statement. Nedelka is very open to being in discussion with us. So yeah, Zoe.
Hi. So there was something that Robin
Maybe come to the microphone.
Hi.
Thank you. Do you get an NC?
I do.
I saw you for the first time today, or maybe I was just aware of you for the first time today. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Zoe.
Hi, I'm Nedelka. Nice to meet you.
Yes, so there's something Robin was touching on about, and then the conversation kind of shifted, but can you speak on what it's like to be Black, a woman, and classical musician, and having that like vulnerability on the stage, but also having that ideal of like the strong Black woman type. Yeah.
So I'm hearing this in the context of my life. So I actually have a classical background. My dad was a classical musician. I was not allowed to sing other kinds of music. I broke away from it when I got into college, which brings its own challenges. If anyone knows, trying to come out of classical music into the improvisation of more contemporary music is hard. It was hard for me, especially, I was raised in church. I was born on a Thursday. The first place my mother went to when she left the hospital on Sunday was to church. So I've been in church my whole life, but it wasn't Black American church. It's, you know, I'm Afro-Latina Caribbean, so we're talking Anglican, we're talking chanting, we're talking, think Catholic. But I love gospel music, and I could not figure it out. Like, I would hear people singing, and I was like, how do they do that? It's not on a page, like. Like when she got to this note, there's nothing between this note, like, you know, those are strong challenges for me. And there's a level of courage that I had to, I still have to, because it's not my first tongue. Like, I wasn't raised in that. I was raised in the church. I know the songs, but that style of how to, like, Episcopalians, they say that we don't know how to pray, we read our prayers. Everything was scripted. So this idea of coming off the page and flowing from your heart and your emotions, for someone like me who's already come out of a situation where I had to break through as a woman, oh my God, performance anxiety. And it's still something I work on in terms of feeling courageous. It's been a process for me. It was a challenge. It's been a challenge, but I think you just gotta keep pressing through. And again, I have to mute the voices and know that that's the prize where I'm walking. This is what I hear it for myself. I feel it for myself. It may not be like everyone else's journey, but it's mine, but I'm getting there. So the time takes longer, the patience. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Is there anybody else that has anything that they would like to ask or share? Yes, Cheyenne. Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. I was wondering actually if Robin could kind of go off of what Zoe asked as well and give her perspective, especially since you're like in the classical sphere and kind of just like,
Are you guys classical?
yeah,
Are you classical?
just your different interactions with, you know, colleagues, professors, studio instructors, different types of things that are really unique to classical music, and what that's like as a Black woman, as a woman, and just as like not European descent, I guess.
Well, first off, I can say that I definitely feel the same when you're talking about shifting from classical to any other like more free genre. Because it's interesting in spaces like I play in church. You know, sometimes I dabble in jazz a little bit, and I instantly feel uncomfortable because I've been taught to sort of read and sort of have this, you know, sit at the edge of the chair, you know, like it's just like.
They're all gone.
I was about to run, because when people usually do that kind of thing,
Yeah. So yeah, I'd have that same experience. But speaking on sort of being in an orchestral setting as a Black woman, it's really, really interesting. I can speak on sort of being a brass player. There aren't any women.
Yeah.
And then there aren't any Black women that play trombone. That it's just like there's so many layers, and it's. I didn't find myself sort of realizing that when I was younger. When I was younger, it was just me. I was just, you know, I play the trombone. That's me. But then you get older and you realize like, oh man, like it really is just me. And so. So it's hard because when I'm a brass player, so the role of a brass player, you're thinking strong, you always have that sort of, that theme that everyone hears, that everyone's like, oh, did you hear that, the Ride of the Valkyries? Like, that's sort of what you know, associate with being a brass player. And so then you're thinking like, oh, well, I have to be this strong person first. And then it's hard to do that when you don't have a vision or any sort of representation of someone being strong that you can look towards. I was listening to nothing but white men play Wagner. And so how do you sort of conceptualize yourself in that space when you look nothing like that? I think it's a little bit difficult. But when you're talking about maybe relationships maybe on campus or in a school setting, I find that I'm literally afraid of the first interaction I have with a conductor because there's always a white man. And so when they look back and say trombones, I'm always afraid of that. They look back and they're like, wait. Like, you know, what instrument do you have? Like, for some reason, I always have that feeling. And then I'm still trying to shake that, but I feel like every interaction I have, it's definitely a learning experience, trying to navigate the relationship between this super Western European space and little old Robin from Atlanta, the blackest city, just, you know, it's so difficult. Yeah.
Can I talk about that? I want to brag on my dad for a second. I think my dad's response to that, again, he was a classical musician, was he created his own choir that sang oratorios. So he went to school for music education at NYU as well. And his topic that he chose to write on were the more esoteric oratorios. And then he made that his life work. So he started a community choir that was all black. And then he also hired all black orchestra. And then all the soloists were also all black. So sorry if I can't give you a certain perspective, because I grew up seeing complete production of classical music, black head to toe. And I also saw black vocalists sing the oratorios down and then turn around and sing spirituals and gospel like church. But I will say the lesson in all of that for me is, and I know sometimes it's hard because we have to faith beyond what we see. You guys are in a day of DIY. Make it yourself. Gather up your friends. Create what you don't see. Be the change that, I don't want to be corny, I don't want to be cliche about it, but literally that's what my dad did. And he had this thing going for 35 years, to the point where his annual concerts would pay for all of the members in the chorale to take a trip to an island in the West Indies, do a concert there. We would get put up, but the money raised by the concert went to the people in the community, based on the fact that this man loved classical music as a black man and felt that this is something he wanted to bring to the community. So he blessed different situations based on, you know, I don't see it, but this is how it should be.
So earlier in the talk, you mentioned your colleague who kind of addressed you in a somewhat derogatory manner. I was just wondering, to what degree self-assessment do you decide, okay, should I? You know?
Do you get this work now? Or so the crazy thing about this, I live more real time. I have to talk myself now out of not saying something. But when I first started coming, again, this is all connected to mental health issues for me as well. When it first started, and I started realizing it's a lot of what I was feeling was because I wasn't speaking up to people, because I would go home and deal with it. I would call people and be like, yeah, 2 years ago when we were at Burger King, do you remember when you said so-and-so? And you'd be like, what? And I would recount the whole thing. You said so-and-so, and I didn't understand it. And they'd be like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. We're gonna have this conversation. And then it got better, then, you know, became like a month, then 2 weeks, you know, then later on in the day, then like a text, we talk, I'd walk away, a text message, and now it's like, boom, bang! And I'm trying to work on that. I think, here's what I'm trying to work with. If it's actually going to help, I'm going to say something. Like if you are walking in ignorance and I feel like you really are trying to, and I want to do it in my best, because this is also part of my spiritual walk. I do really believe in human beings. I also think that we have bigger issues than green people, purple people. I think we need to be concerned with the earth is going to be here or not, global warming. So I try to decide how I'm going to say it. I am going to say it. But then there are also times when I realize like this conversation might get ignorant. Maybe I shouldn't right here. So I wait from time to time, but I definitely, more times than not, I'm gonna say something right here. Right here, right now. You know, how many of us have parents like, wherever it goes down is where it goes down? That's my general rule.
Can you, okay, speaking on people walking in ignorance, can you sort of speak to the student-teacher, student-professor, student-maestro relationship if there's someone walking in ignorance and they offend you, or even in that relation? Okay. Yeah, hierarchy. Like, how do you addressing?
Because yeah, I mean, there's ways to go about it, but I think it needs, and this is the whole issue because we have a lot of old guard mentality still walking around right now. That you guys, you just need to call it out. Call it out respectfully. I would never tell you to be disrespectful. Call it out, but call it out respectfully, but call it out. And what does that mean to you that this person, are you afraid that they would retaliate in some way that would affect your life?
I think maybe one of the I feel like students might not feel inclined to do that because they feel like, oh, well, I am one of the few black people here. If I say something to you, it's over for all of us, or it might be over for me and my reputation, or, like someone affecting you in that way, just because maybe the color of your skin, but also just that hierarchy.
I understand that. I came here as a student. Before teaching, I came here as a student. And there were some interesting things that I experienced in classrooms. Like just conversations that were ridiculous about black people. And I thought about it, and I'm not trying to drag anyone, so I'm not going to mention any names, but in the moment I was like, damn, like this is a place that people hold in high regard, and you're teaching ignorance. And if I were not in the room, and this would have gone unchallenged, and we would have another crop of human beings going out there perpetuating injustice, inequality, ignorance, racist ideas. And so it was, it was kind of risky because there's things like, am I not gonna get, a little scholarship money for the next semester? They're not gonna put me in X amount of chair. Like, I'm not gonna get a solo. But at this point, see, this is what ancestors had to reckon with for stuff that they would never experience. It was about standing up to something just so that next generation can live. Sometimes we won't reap the benefits from some stuff, and sometimes people will try to punish us for our truth. But the reason that you can sit here and ask this question as a black person is because somebody did it for you. So I kind of think it's your responsibility. It's not whether should I, how I should, you're supposed to. It's just how you do it.
I'm curious to know about, speaking about responsibility and, being in these spaces, being the only face in these spaces, where do we draw the line between tokenism and, just being in the spaces and being responsible for representing people and calling people in line in these spaces?
So for me, again, it's using my space to teach. When we talk, because this is a music school, we have to talk about the culture. And so I use that space to do that, but also at the same time, every year there's something that I definitely have to go to administration about. I have to. There are certain things that have changed since I've been here, and there are certain things I'm still asking about. And I will continue to ask. And so, maybe perhaps some people don't come to me anymore because they know if they come to talk with me and we have this conversation, they know where it's gonna go. And there was a point where I started feeling like, oh God, they're gonna think I'm that angry black woman, or here she come with that black talk again. Yeah. Yeah, she does, and she's coming. She does come. I love that, she does come. I'm gonna use that.
So the question I had revolved around something we haven't really talked about that much, but it's a question about like black motherhood. I heard something last week that I didn't necessarily agree with, but I think it was just said to provoke conversation. And if you guys remember what it was, because I don't remember what it was something like a mother can raise a boy, but a father can raise a man.
Oh, yeah.
And that wasn't something I necessarily agreed with, especially because I grew up in like a single mother household. So my question is still on the lines of like, is there anything, is that something that's a pressing concern in your life? And do you think there's anything that you think your son is like missing and that you feel like you can't provide like to him, like in his maturation? I'm just wondering. I'm trying to pick your brain.
Yeah, I do. I've apologized to my son actually for I've apologized to him because it's just like, I'm sorry. You don't have a two-parent household. I can't demonstrate for you or model what it's like to be a man. Sorry you have to figure this out on your own. That's hard, because there are things I've had to figure out on my own, but to figure out how to be a black man, or the fact that I have to tell him stuff like, you know, do what you gotta do, just be sure you get home. You know, like, but what I do also console myself with is, I also try to show him as a young black man how he should be dealing with a black woman. Yeah. So the best I can do is maintain my standards. I can't show you how to shave. It took me a long time to figure out how to do a tie. I forgot how to do it at this point because he's been doing his own. But what I can show you is when you come to me, come correct. And so there's all this pushback, and then sometimes I have to, say to myself, I don't want to suppress the spirit. But then I also know that, and this is in general, if I'm honest about it, with even just dealing with you guys, I love and respect your strength and your conviction and the smarts that you guys have, but you are young. And I'm grown. And so when I'm talking with my son, and he sounds smart, smart, and he means it. He's very convincing. And then I have to check myself and be like, you 17. You talking to me as a 17-year-old, and I don't want to take that away from you, but there are things you have not even considered that you don't know that can possibly or that will come down the line. So when in terms of that, I feel it very strongly. That's probably one of the, it's not a regret, but it's something that I have to pray on a lot. But again, I get up every day and I'm like, no, okay, no. It's a constant day to day, and he's trying and I'm trying, and society's telling me, if I look at enough stuff, like, I don't even want to utter the words, but it's a real concern. But all I can do is hold standards.
I'm going to open it up for one more question, if there is anyone. No?
Question.
Oh, okay. We'll do two more and then I'll be done with that. Raji, would you like to go first?
You are wearing me. I was like, his face, she looks like a little cute cat. But I was like, oh, she doesn't look like a cat. She has no makeup.
When you were a student and as a woman and as being a minority, how did you find your place in Boston, or make your place here at NEC, or just how did you stay truthful to yourself?
That was hard for me because I longed for community. I still do. But I also think that part of my own process and my own maturation, she's so cute, she's like, oh my God. Part of my own, part of my own maturation was self-acceptance and to learning to enjoy alone time and figuring out what it is that I like to do. And so when I found myself alone, and one thing, I had to be honest, I wanted to be entertained. I think a lot of times we don't want to be alone because we want to do something. But then I started getting clearer about my goals, my agenda, what I even want to get out of my experience as a student. And even now that I'm not a student anymore, but I do have this music learning experience, those moments when I feel like I want to connect with something or someone and I can't, I literally turn to music. Like I use that to be a moment to focus, because I can end up, you know, as anybody, but definitely because I am a parent with a child and I work in different places and I'm a musician. Sometimes you can get busy to do your art, and so now it's just like, oh, that was a good opportunity right there. So some of it is the practice of discipline, and not to use the time to like entertain myself or be in social media too long because I'm longing for connection. Maybe I'm not the only one, maybe I am the only one. So I've learned to just really focus, because I came up here to do music, and this is, you know, it costs.
Yeah.
It has a price tag on it, and so I want to, you know, maximize what I'm getting out of it. So in terms of like finding my way in Boston, it's teaching me to dig into who I am and to accept myself and to go for those things before I get out in the street, to practice them and refine them, so that, you know, because I have suffered with performance anxiety, and a lot of it has to do with how prepared we feel. Yeah. So if I use that time wisely, it kind of covers a bunch of stuff, and then I get to meet other people who are like, hey, how are you? And then healthy connections come out of that, versus from a place of, I'm alone, I feel lonely. Yeah.
Want to take one more question, and then.
Yeah, as a student in CI, I just wanted to ask your like opinions on like diversity in the CI department and representations of blackness and black music.
Who sent you?
Well, we had this. We're doing this song "Woke Up This Morning with My Mind on Freedom" in the department for our production, and there's like no black people in our department, and it's kind of sparked a debate. You know, about like if it's like being used appropriately.
Right. What's the context? What's the production? I actually don't know.
It's songs of victory and defeat.
I used to have a lot of, there are certain songs, if I'm honest, I don't like to hear white folks singing, like We Shall Overcome, Even This Load a Lot of Mine. Is it in the context of other genres of music, or is it only?
Big production, there's a lot of songs.
I can justify that. So I am from CI, and the year I was there, someone told me, oh my God, you're the only black person, and we've not had a black person in this department in 5 years. With a lot of the change that happens in the world, it starts with the youth. And I'm not asking you to create an uprising, but this is your learning experience, Gina. This is your learning experience. You guys are going to be the shapeshifters of the world. And so I think now is a good time to practice, bring in, and even me, I will say I am not exempt from correction. So if there's something that I'm doing out of line, if there's something I'm not doing, I would want someone to respectfully let me know. Because I am from a different generation, and some of our norms are not, they weren't good. They're not ones that we should keep. So if you have this insight, I think you do also, especially because, what do you identify as?
What do you mean, like, in terms of like
Ethnicity.
Ethnicity, one white and Jewish.
Yeah, especially as someone who is white looking at this and feeling uncomfortable about it. I think on a lot of levels you have reason to question it. I think it's legitimate. It's something that I guess I can say that I reached out to Eden about that. Not specifically that, but about, you know, diversity and inclusion. She and I talked very, very clearly about it, but I think some of this is a little larger than Department 2, not meaning to be disrespectful to the college. I think we need to just get more black people in the school too, and make it possible for them to attend. I was having the conversation earlier. I taught in public schools in New York. We never saw any promotions from certain schools. But there are other schools who receive promotions from, advertisement from other institutions. So I think some of that is not necessarily departmental. Again, I'm not trying to disrespect NEC, but it is an issue. And I'm talking about it. I talk with who I talk with. And I think you guys got to talk too, especially because you're not black. Yeah. And especially because you're in that new generation coming up. I think there's power in that. To me, that is allyship. Yeah. There are different ways of allyship for me. One of them is giving up power. Another one is giving up money. And another one is speaking up. So, use your platform.
Thank you so much, Nedelka, for being here. I think we can all say that we've gained a lot of perspective. We've gained some golden nuggets to go home and think about in our own experiences through hearing about your experiences. And I think this workshop or this talk was also especially good because, we have a really diverse room of people. This is the most diverse I've seen NEC probably. No, seriously. But it's really great to have you all here, and it's really great for you guys to actually be part of the conversations that we've been having. It's so important to have people on faculty that are involved in student projects and student activities open-heartedly and transparently and all those important D words. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for being here. We have we're going to plug ourselves for a second. We have an Instagram that we would like you all to please follow right now if you have your phones. It's at NEC BSU.
Did you already do
at NEC at NEC.BSU, correct? Oh, at bsu.nec. I'm sorry. Then we've got a Facebook page as well, which is the New England Conservatories Black Students Union. I'm sorry, I don't do social media. Okay, and then we've also got a website for Being Black in America. It is beingblackinamerica.org. There will be pictures if you would like to see yourself looking beautiful by the photos that Paul Marty has taken. We will be uploading pictures on there and uploading more information about upcoming seminars. Next week is going to be our final seminar. Keep a lookout on our social media pages about more details, what it's going to be about, what we're going to be discussing. Thank you to everyone who's watching on live. I don't think there's anyone, but there might be people.
Yes. And can I just say thank you to you? I've said this to them before. So I came to NEC in 2010, and I think 2011 we brought back what was the African American Student Union. And I think before that, there may not have been a presence of a black organization or a black-centric organization since 70s. Because I look, there's documentation the school has in the library, like letters and different things that the organization was seeking. And so I saw when it came back in this era, and the way you guys are moving and handling and organizing and manifesting, I'm pretty sure who you are as people, but I also want to extend it to you, and I believe that your generation is crazy powerful and fearless. So it gives me hope. My son is in this generation, and you know what's before you. You see what's happening in this country, and the fact that you guys are evolving the organization, the fact that you took it from African American to Black Student Union is progressive. And I just want to thank you all for what you're doing and what you're about to do.
And just one last thing, we want to thank the Classically Black podcast for collaborating with us on this seminar. Yeah. They actually created this podcast with in mind this topic and who we are and what we're trying to do here. So we really want to say thank you to them, and we want to encourage you guys to actually listen to their podcast. They've been doing a really great work the past 12 months. So.
So you can get their details on the piece of paper that's at the table outside. Please get food, eat as much as you like, take some fruit, go make a smoothie.